Hey there, boys. We've got a really interesting video here today. We just had a bunch of new weapons drop, and I gotta be honest, Bungie kind of cooked with a lot of the perks. Some of them may not be the strongest, and some of the weapons we wanted to be amazing weren't, but overall, there's a lot of weapons with a lot of new exclusive perk combinations, so we're going to get into that. If you want to look at these yourself, you can go to d2foundry.gg and pretty much just put in the Season of Wish filter here, and then look for all the new stuff. So first up on the list is going to be the Prophecy Pulse Rifles. And we can have a look. These pretty much look like they're designed for PvP. You can see it has Headseeker. It's got that new Origin trait, which is going to be giving it free damage at the bottom of the mag and free range at the top half, which is obviously a designed for PvP perk. We'll see how it holds up in PvE on the shotgun though. Following that, we have another Pulse from Prophecy, of course. This one's going to be a different frame, but ultimately pretty much the same thing. It does have Keep Away Headseeker, so if you are wanting a Pulse Rifle for PvP, this one is definitely a contender with Messenger. It's important to note that the newer weapons in the game actually have a recoil pattern which is consistent, which does make them generally better than the older weapons, even if they did have the same perks. Next up, we're going to have Wildstyle. This is one I was really excited about, but unfortunately the perks just aren't going to do it here. So you can see right away there's no auto-loading holster. Immediately, it's just not good. You might be able to stack up Envious and use it for a few shots during damage. However, it doesn't have access to Vorpal either. It only has access to Surrounded as a real damage perk. So I'm not really sure what Bungie was going for here. Maybe some kind of ag-cleared non-waveframe grenade launcher, but you're definitely better off just using a waveframe or anything. Otherwise, I would just stick with Wilder Flight for the most part on this one. Next up, we're going to have Adjudicator. This is the kinetic SMG added in Prophecy now, and you can see right here, looks like another nuisance for PvP. It's pretty much just got the Unending Tempest roll. It also has Onslaught, which is pretty cool. And it has access to like Frenzy, but no shoot to loot, so there's not really much of a purpose for it in PvE. Next up, we've got Tusk of the Boore, and this is one I'm actually really excited about for PvE because it has Chain Reaction. Chain Reaction, obviously, pretty much just the best perk on a waveframe in the game right now. And the third column is a little bit lackluster. However, I think I'm either going to go with Slice, Slideways, or Enlightened Action. The reason I'd go with Slice is because this is kind of a weapon you can use utility on. You don't necessarily need to have a raw killing power on both perks for your weapons. And ultimately, having this be a Slice weapon can help with your survivability in harder content. We'll also have to see if there's any broken interactions using Slice. Maybe it can hit multiple targets at once and still only use one stack. I'm not totally sure on that. I haven't obtained any of the weapons. I'm just going through the theoretical perks right now on the Foundry. Next up, we've got the Summoner. This will be available from Trials once it is around. And you can see it's mostly going to be a PvP choice here. It does have an okay PvE role, I guess, with like Heal Clip Onslaught or something. Remember, Heal Clip did just get buffed, so it's going to be giving you back 120 health every time instead of 60. Literally double the effect, which is pretty good. But ultimately, it's just not really a niche we need filled for the most part, and so I don't think it's going to be that great still. But it is an option. You also have some other perks like Overflow and stuff, but ultimately, this is a legendary primary that's trying to do ag clear, so not a huge priority to me. Next up, we've got the Slammer. This is one I think is just absolutely absurd. Bungie seems to have just put the most insane perks on it. You can see right away it's got Eager Edge. This is totally new. It's a Vortex frame also. And we did learn during the crafting by applying Eager Edge to Vortex frame swords. Eager Edge does actually go faster on Vortex frame swords. However, the problem with this is that it doesn't get crafted Eager Edge, so you can't have the enhanced bit. So I imagine the current swords with Eager Edge are still going to be better. But regardless, this is still very goofy. We're going to have to test it out for sure, though. We also have bait and switch on a sword, which is really weird. Remember, this is now 30%, not 35%. So it's pretty much the same buff as Whirlwind Blade. However, obviously, you can proc this immediately, which is very nice for not needing to build it up. So you might even have a decent damage sword here for Crota with Relentless Strikes and bait and switch. It also has Cold Steel, which could make for a decent utility perk paired with Eager Edge. Like if I was to make an Eager Edge sword out of this, I'd probably put Cold Steel with it just to have that utility where I can slow things, but this is not a major perk by any means. Could also even use permeability so that you can have scavenger mods apply to it without needing to have a stasis scavenger applied. which might be a nice niche too, because again, you're just looking for a utility perk in the other tree since you're not really doing damage or ag clear with an E or edge sword. And up next, we've got the Prophet. This is going to be the new Trials Scout Rifle, and we can see it's going to be a stasis high impact frame. And honestly, it has some decent perks as like a utility weapon for PvE, I guess, like demo and explosive payload. It also has enlightened action, which might, not totally sure, but might proc twice because explosive payload hits twice. But again, I'm not totally sure on that. Otherwise, I think this is pretty clearly a PvP focused weapon. It's got perks like Kill Clip, which I believe will bring it into 2-tapping potential. You can see right there, it'll 2-tap most people now at anything other than 10 resilience. So definitely an interesting PvP choice here. It's also got Cascade Point, which could be pretty silly, again, for PvP. Get a pretty low time to kill. So definitely an interesting weapon, but probably not anything unique for PvE. Next up, we've got Judgment. And Judgment is really similar to what it used to be, but it looks like they added a few new perks like Enlightened Action, and they also gave it Headstone. And I think this is actually a really interesting combo. I think, and I might be totally wrong here, I haven't tried it, Headstone and timed payload might self-proc the Headstone, because obviously the timed payload, it would explode after the crystal spawns, in theory. So we'll have to see if that actually works, but if it does, this could be a very goofy PvP choice, and it's still got some pretty decent perks like Slide Opening. However, the stats are still not amazing, and being made stasis is going to reduce its damage in PvE compared to the old version, which pretty much has the same god roll for PvE of demo and timed payload. So definitely an interesting choice, but I don't think it's really going to define any of the meta, but it does have some pretty cool unique combos at least. Next up, we've got the new re-released Multimac for Iron Banner, and you can see right away, no shoot to loot, but it does have Under Over, which is pretty interesting. It could be a decent barrier weapon for like PvE, especially when you combine it with something like Frenzy, which is pretty good. But I think it's pretty clear this weapon was designed for PvP, since it does have Iron Reach and Dynamic Sway, and then obviously you could just spec all the range, and you're up to 84 range. Pretty good. And who cares about the stability? It's an SMG, and they don't have recoil. And then obviously you could use Field Tested, and it would only take like a few kills to get up to 100 range. Actually, it would take a lot of kills, but you could still get a little bit of extra range out of some Field Tested stacks, which are pretty good. Or you could use Skulking Wolf, which is obviously pretty underrated PvP perk. I know that Cammy talks about it a lot if you do want to see some good examples of using it. I'm not really an amazing PvP player, but I definitely see use out of the perk whenever I use it. And next up, we're going to have the Prosecutor. This one, once again, looks like it's either a PvP weapon or trying to be some kind of ag clear legendary primary. So I'm going to mostly just call this a PvP weapon. You can see it's got Keep Away, which is obviously like just the best perk in PvP in the game. And Target Lock, which is okay, although not amazing on auto rifles. But it does have stuff like Tap the Trigger. I also think that Golden Tricorn is pretty good on something like an auto rifle, where you can kind of just kill a target and then snap to the next one because you have a big magazine. You could also play around with Cascade Point, obviously, but this isn't really going to be the most amazing PvE weapon in the game. Pretty common trend for the Prophecy weapons, but I think that's okay because I feel like they were being designed for PvP specifically, and they certainly have PvP-oriented perks. Alright, next up we have a Sudden Death. We have some pretty interesting perks here, but there's not really a insane PvE combination I'm really looking at here. However, we do have the classic PvP combo of Threat Detector and Opening Shot. Obviously, when you combine just one enemy being near you, which is pretty normal for a shotgun, and Opening Shot, you can get some pretty cracked out stats. As for the PvE side of things, I believe this is our first energy aggressive frame shotgun to have Cascade Point, and aggressive frames are okay with Cascade Point. They pretty much are similar to rapid fires with Cascade Point, however they do slightly less DPS for a decent chunk more total damage. It also has Trench Barrel, but I would recommend using Trench Barrel on a kinetic weapon because you would pretty much only use this perk with Tractor Cannon if you're using it for DPS. And that is simply because of the kinetic damage buff that kinetic weapons have, which just puts Imperial Decree above this. However, if for some reason you specifically need an energy slot shotgun and you only want to use one weapon to do DPS with your Tractor, this is probably the play because it would surge match with Tractor. It would also be nice because it would scavenger match with Tractor. So if you did want to use it as a 1-2 punch, you would have an existent argument despite it being an aggressive frame, just because it would surge match with Tractor, which would allow you to use one scavenger mod to get more ammo for both of your weapons, which is the reason I like to use the Deicide. However, that's obviously not obtainable right now. And it looks like the Guardian Games weapons aren't categorized under the season, so we'll have to look them up specifically. But let's look at the new grenade launcher. This is a compressed waveframe launcher, so it's sort of like the one from Neo Muna, the stasis one that nobody cares about. But if we look right now, the perks don't really seem that interesting to me either. I kind of expected this one to not be that good. And for the most part, I'm okay with that from these event weapons because there's heavy FOMO surrounding them. And if you were to make them extremely powerful, then it would be unfair to people who can't get them. So these are kind of expected to be mid, but we still might be able to get some unique picks out of them. Obviously, we have the Volt Shot chain reaction combo that Bungie told us about. I think this is bait. This is a heavy weapon. First of all, you have very limited ammo. And secondly, the magazine size is pretty much just the entire reserve of the weapon. You can see it says 1 right now, but I think that that's just a bug and it's using like the special weapon modifiers because obviously the one that we already have on Neo Muna that's a heavy weapon has the normal drum size of 6. That being said, if they ever do some funny stuff with the wave frames that make them do more damage than adaptives, you do have the Envious and Cascade or the auto-loading and Cascade option here, which would be the best DPS. However, it doesn't have like bait and switch or any of the big damage perks for increasing the total damage with that. So I would pretty much just call this a waste of time for the most part, unfortunately. But it is definitely unique, and if that's what you're into, then I would pick this up. But that's the only reason I'd go for it. Sorry, I had to make sure I'm looking at the right one. I'm pretty sure the one with no year is the correct version, and 2023 would be last year. So, looking at this, the Traxa Post, this is going to be a lightweight frame scout rifle. It's going to be strand, unfortunately, not kinetic, so we're not getting that damage buff from being kinetic. However, it does have some okay perks. You've got like explosive payload and enlightened action, so it's like okay for grandmasters and stuff as a stun stick. However, we already have a suite of scout rifles with shoot to loot and explosive payload, which I would definitely use over this. So other than that, it's still got some funny PvP combinations like Zen Moment Kill Clip are pretty good. It's got Cascade Point for those troll plays as well if you want to do that. But otherwise, this definitely isn't anything for PvE that's out of the ordinary, and I wouldn't waste your time on it. And so you can see, guys, right away, we've got the obvious meta role here. We've got, of course, Repulsor Brace and Destabilizing Rounds. Obviously, this is going to be the best weapon in the game. No, this is completely overrated. I'm just joking, guys. This is not a good perk combination, despite what people say. Stabilizing Rounds has a huge cooldown. You have to shoot a bunch of enemies. You have to reload multiple times to really start proccing a Repulsor Brace. And without any reload or damage perks, it takes absolutely ages to do that. So I definitely don't recommend it. However, we can see that Bungie's promised role of Repulsor and Surrounded came through. I don't know why they were trying to hype that up. I don't think anybody cares about this perk combination. But it does have the classic Threat Detector Surrounded, I guess, and some other stuff like that. It's got like Grave Robber and Swash, so it's got some goofy synergies. But I think for the most part, these are all what I'm going to call pointless synergy, where they've got good synergy, but that synergy just doesn't really do anything that's useful in the game. Anyways, that's going to do it for all the weapons. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope it helped you decide what you want to go after. I tried to make this really not biased, but obviously I know more about PvE than PvP, so I did give my 2 cents more there. However, I can still kind of tell what a good PvP role is. It's pretty much, you know, consistency perks, damage perks, that kind of thing. And I am decently up to date on those, like keep away being good and all that. As for PvE, I don't think we really had any major meta shifters. I think the biggest deal is going to be that GM sword and the Iron Banner waveframe launcher. Obviously having a chain reaction grenade launcher and the kinetic slot. Also the goofy new sword. I think that is going to be just absolutely hilarious, and I can't wait to go for that also. I'm definitely going to be going for that Eager Edge roll and testing it out for you guys in the future. So if you do want to see that, make sure you subscribe, comment, like, all that. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.